Welcome to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and joining me today is Anita Irvin. She is the Executive Director of Insight Memory Care Center. Thank you so much for being here, Anita.
It's my pleasure.
So I am aware of Insight Memory Care Center, but have never had you on the show before. Someone I met at the Fairfax Fall Festival asked me if I knew about Insight Memory Care Center, and I'm like, we need to do a show because I think there is such a demand among people I know, my own friends, my own network, for services that are provided to those who have dementia. So give me a little background about how Insight Memory Care Center started.
So in 1984, Lynn Noyes, who was a certified home care hospice nurse, was running a family support group in a church. She realized through that support group that there was a huge need for those participants at that point in time. So she started a group with 3 participants in the basement of a church, and that's kind of how Insight came to fruition. Back in the day, it was the Family Respite Center.
Right, and that's 1984. That is so long ago. And now I think people know more about dementia than we ever did before. I think because, you know, I'm part of the boomer generation that is aging, and we are such a large generation that almost everybody knows somebody who has a spouse, parents, or someone who is struggling with dementia. So your program has gone from a church basement with 3 people to 2 different locations. Tell me a little bit about those programs.
So we've gone from 3 participants all the way up to our licensed adult day center can serve 60 participants per day. But the reality is, when somebody goes to a neurologist or a PCP, they might have mild cognitive impairment. So when you hear those words, a family kind of gets scared and they're like, what do I do with that, right? How do I help my loved one? So back in 2015, we created our early stage program, which is our Reconnections program. That is a social-based program, a brain health program where they come together 5 hours a day, 4 days a week, and they create community. They do brain health together, they do arts and crafts together, they do community service together. We never talk about the impairment. It's about engagement and it's about that social piece. Those folks in that program are totally independent. Some are so high functioning they can still drive to the program. But as they progress, because we know dementia is a progressive disease, we then have an adult day center here in Fairfax County, right on Waples Mill Road, that serves 60 participants. We have 3 groups within the day center, Blue, Orange, and Coral. We're the only dementia-specific adult day center in the Northern Virginia, DC area. We're also the only adult day center who does end-stage dementia care. We're open 5 days a week, 10 hours a day from 7:30 to 5:30. People can come and go as they please. It's just like day center, if you will. People can come at 10:30, they can come at 7:30, they can stay till 5:30. We really tailor each of our participants' experience to their person-centered needs. So you might like birds, so we might do a program on birds, but I might like sports and we'll tailor something to me. So it's really about creating community and purposeful engagement throughout the day for all of our participants.
That's really amazing. And the fact that you do free early stage screenings, which I think is something I'd like our viewers to understand, that if you're not sure, you know, if you want to see if just forgetfulness is something besides just forgetfulness, that they can reach out to you.
Absolutely. So anybody can call us and we do free memory screenings. We never diagnose. We run the screening and then we give those results to that person and we ask them to follow up with their physician to give them a baseline. Maybe there is nothing going on, but they want a baseline for that brain health for themselves, and their doctor can start to have a baseline for them as they age in place.
Well, I think that is probably a wonderful program for a lot of people who are looking for something besides going straight to a physician. And you've got so much experience doing this, it seems to me that you probably develop really strong relationships with families. And caregiving, since that is how you started out, really was as a respite program for caregivers. What other kinds of supports do you have for caregivers in a family?
So we have 3 prongs to our mission. It's care, support, and educate. So our care piece is for that participant for the respite services like we just talked about. Our support is for support groups. So we have a number of support groups that tailor to spouses, might tailor to the sandwich generation for a working adult, Lewy body, frontal temporal dementia, all the different types of dementia that we provide free of service. People don't have to be enrolled in the day center to take advantage of that. The The silver lining of COVID is we're still doing those virtual, so we're able to serve more people during that time.
Well, let's talk about COVID. You brought up something. We're hardly post-COVID, but it was 2 years, and it was a struggle, especially for in-person programs. What did you do?
So March 16th, we closed our doors, and we gathered as a team on the 17th, and we said, okay, how do we do this? And we literally pivoted every service that we had virtually. We do support groups virtually, which we've maintained. Our monthly free caregiver training or education, we continue to do those virtually. And then we pivoted all of our engagement for our participants virtually. Our early stage program that we talked about earlier, our Reconnections program, that still has a component of virtual aspects for our participants, which is fantastic. Some of our participants come in person, but they like that virtual piece because they go home and they're challenged with their homework a little bit to do some research, and then they come back on the virtual program. They feel like they're challenged a little bit more. The old cliche, if you don't use it, you lose it.
Right.
We need to use it. We need to use our brains more often. So we pivoted everything, and then we heard our families go, we need help. And we came back as a team. We served families by going to their house and walking with their caregivers, their participants. All these things where families couldn't get the respite care that we're so designed to provide, we had to think outside the box. I'm so proud of the team that I serve with. We were the only day center that opened 90 days after the pandemic hit. We were serving 53 per day when we had to shut our doors. We opened with 8. We had to make sure that we masked. We did all the things, right? All the cleaning.
Right.
We incorporated Fairfax County Department of Health, came and looked at all of our procedures, put it in place, and we've been open ever since. We have mandated vaccinations to keep everybody safe. We have tested when it's been appropriate. We have done all the things to keep everybody safe. But today, I'm happy to tell you that we're serving 53 per day in the day center today. And I couldn't be more proud of our team who came together to continue to serve because there's such a need.
That is remarkable. 90 days and you reopened again. But you know, you did all the protocols, and you know, in the vaccines at one point, and probably still are very controversial. So mandating vaccines, I believe that you had to do that. But what kind of response did you get when you said that's our policy?
You know, from our participants and our families, there was not one question. They needed the service. They knew that's how we had to stay safe. Our staff, we had a few people that were very anxious about it. A lot of folks that might be not necessarily from this country. And so I really felt like it was important to listen to those employees, to educate them, to do some additional education, to talk through their concerns, to talk further. And then what I said to them was, go talk to your physician and then come back to me. And by that time, when they came back to me, they were like, we're ready to do this. And so it took a lot of one-on-one of listening to concerns, showing that I cared for them as an individual, and that we weren't just mandating something just to mandate it, but there was a reason behind it for their safety as well as our participants. And through that, we got through it. But it took a little extra listening and caring about people to get us to the point where everybody was on board for that.
That is wonderful. I mean, when your staff supports the program and cares about the work they do, that they're willing to do that, that is one of the best things I've heard in all the interviews I've done through this COVID period. So tell me about Zoom. You know, 2 things that I think all of us have learned to use is Zoom and QR codes, remarkably. And so I talk about both of those things, but how did your families, your participants, your caregivers, you know, embrace this new thing we all had to learn?
Well, for the rec therapy staff, it's a tad bit challenging because when you have somebody on dementia and they're looking at TV and there's all these squares and what is this about? We had a few bumps for sure, but we overcame it together and we talked through that for sure. A lot of our families and our care partners struggled with it for sure because they're older, they were not used to it, and so really taking that time to make sure that they got the help that they needed to ensure that they got the support they needed to be on the programs that they needed was really important.
So, and that's something you're continuing because some of these programs are still virtual for you.
All of our support groups remain virtual, except 2. We're starting 2 new ones, but all of them remain virtual because we're able to serve more people. And what caregivers have said to us is, I'm stressed out already, but if I have to leave my house and come to a support group, you're putting one more thing on my plate. But if I can sit at home and do a support group virtually, it makes my life a little easier. I can so relate. My dad was diagnosed in 2020. Working full time, trying to be a wife, and trying to care for my folks is a lot. And so we understand that, and we continue to keep a pulse on what our caregivers need.
So it's interesting because you are the sandwich generation and you are dealing with dementia in your own family. So, but where you started in your career didn't necessarily, you probably didn't think, well, I think I will have this as my career in case I have a parent.
No.
So how did you choose your career path?
So when I graduated from college, I thought I wanted to work with kids. And when I did my internship my senior year, I worked at a Jewish community center, and they had an adult day health within the Jewish community center. So I worked from kids all the way up to 105. Fell in love with this Alzheimer's Day Center piece. And then when I got out of school, I worked for an ALF, assisted living, and connected with seniors. And from there have just kind of grown. And before I came to Insight, I ran a community for about 15 years. And just the work-life balance of not having work-life balance was a bit much. And so right before COVID is when I decided, you know what, Insight's been trying to recruit me for a while. It's time for me to take a break. Let me take a break.
Well, it was their gain, obviously. And the fact that you are living the experience of your families is also amazing. But I would point out that those of us who are not anticipating the level of need, those of us who are boomers, and we are a huge generation, and so many of us are turning 65 every single day, and the fact that we need to build it before we need it, because I think the need is going to be even greater than what you are seeing now.
Oh, I would agree. I would agree. I think that we're seeing more and more people because dementia, hopefully because the stigma is going away, that people are getting diagnosed earlier so that they can get the support services and the engagement that they need early on. I totally agree with you.
Well, and that's why when we come back from this break, we are going to talk with you further about the fact that Insight Memory Care Center continues to develop programs, the fact that you are also serving people who may not be able to afford the kind of services other families can afford, and the fact that you are also reaching out to the LGBTQ community, which is something we talk a lot about on this show because I am an advocate and an ally in that space. So please join us after this short break when we will come back and talk to Anita Irvin. She is the Executive Director of the Insight Memory Care Center located in Fairfax and Sterling, and you can find them online at insightmcc.org.
Caitlin, be serious. No, take the oath. Come on. I'm totally taking this seriously. Okay, I'm ready. You may begin. I pledge that I will never meet in person with anyone I first met online without checking with my parent or guardian. And furthermore, if my parent or guardian agrees to the meeting, it will be in a public place and my parent or guardian must come along. Do you pinky swear? I do.
When you teach your kids about internet safety, they'll pass it on. For more information, go to cableclicksmart.org.
So how was work?
It was 1,300 hours. My math class from 302 was in the trenches. Davy Roth had it the worst. Fractions were coming at him left and right. He just didn't get the damn things. 2 days ago, I tried to teach him what 1/4 of 1/2 was using different sizes of blocks. Yesterday, I tried again by dividing up pizza. Both missions failed.
Oh no.
But today, I was ready. I created a combat math game where the only way to beat the enemy is to out-fraction them. Davy conquered every last denominator. My game was so successful, the principal is deploying it to math squadrons all over the school.
Anywho, how was your day?
Oh, today my boss treated the office to salad wraps.
Salad wraps.
I know.
Give your town a reason to celebrate, because every Goodwill item you bring home brings job training and more to your community. Goodwill, bring good home.
Welcome back to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and we are talking with Anita Irvin. She is the Executive Director of Insight Memory Care Center, located in both Fairfax and in Sterling. Thank you so much for being here. I think this is an important and interesting conversation to have about the services that you provide. So let's talk a little bit about your early stage program.
So, you know, when somebody gets a diagnosis with mild cognitive impairment, both that spouse and that person are affected by that disease, that diagnosis. So we've created a couple of programs called Mind and Body, which is a 5-week program where both participants can come together, create community, and really do an activity together, have dinner together, but then there's a space in that time where the participant does an activity and that caregiver can go get some support services. So it's not creating an additional time for them to have to create that support service. So we have Mind and Body, which is fantastic. We also have memory cafes, which are free service that spouses can come and with their participant, engage in dinner and activities together, as well as Share. And Share is an evidence-based program. It's a 5 to 6 weeks series where they meet with a shared counselor, and that person that has the diagnosis can really talk about what do they want through the disease process. We're empowering them to make some of those decisions early on, understanding that this is an insidious disease and the path may not go that way, but we're encouraging the family to put their team in place, that caregiver, so their team is in place, and that participant has some say-so in what they want in their care.
You know, that's so interesting too, because I have friends where there is a spouse who's supporting another spouse with dementia. Does it often work that way? What about when you have a couple where maybe both of them are starting to exhibit signs of dementia?
You know, we've cared for a couple of those in the day center where we've had both parents diagnosed, and that's a lot to fall on the kids. And so a lot of times at Insight, we work with those kids to ensure that they have the support system that they need. And maybe that's helping them connect with a geriatric care manager, or maybe that's connecting them with a home care agency, just so that they can have a little bit of a life too. Because I think if we're all were to take a step back, our parents wouldn't want us to sacrifice our entire life to care for them and give up everything that we love on top of it. So I think it's finding the balance of being a caregiver, but also not being a caregiver to the point where my health is at detriment. And we hear that all the time, don't we?
Yes.
As a caregiver,
Yes.
The caregiver is the one who goes first. And it's because you're giving everything that you can to ensure your loved one's getting all that they need.
Yeah, you're so right about that. It is exhausting, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally draining as well. So give us some background too on how you meet the needs of people who have different financial means in order to take advantage of these services.
So this is kind of one of my favorite parts of our service, right? And we are so mission driven. So we want to serve everybody that needs a service. And if we have a family that comes to us and says, we can't afford your services, we put $250,000 in our budget every single year to serve the underprivileged. They do have to go through a qualifying process, obviously through our board of directors and our finance committee, but it allows us to continue to serve folks who can't afford our services. And so just last week, a family called us in crisis. Woman was coming out of rehab, son couldn't stay home with her, needed immediate placement, and within 48 hours we were able to tell them, you can attend 5 days a week and this is all you have to pay for our services. And there's nothing greater than being able to say to a family, you can get the help that you need, that you desperately need, even though you can't afford this.
It is amazing. And I know that nonprofits always run on, you know, corporate donations, private donations, grants, any kind of funding that you can get that supports the work that you're doing.
Yes.
So you've got 53 people right now. You know, do you see a time at which you would need to dramatically increase your capacity? What would that look like for you?
You know, my vision as an executive director is really to create more day centers, more early stage programs, because it's really in that early stage process that people get connected as a community. And a lot of times they get connected and then they kind of walk through the whole disease process together. We have families who connected in mind and body and still their loved one has passed away, but they're still connected in community. And so it really is creating that community and that niche early on. But my heart is, I hope one day we'll have 2 or 3 day centers in Fairfax County. I mean, we have people in Alexandria, people in Arlington. That's really hard to get out here to Fairfax for the day center, but they need services. And so how do we do that? And so we're really looking at strategically, where should we look at the new next day center possibly?
That is very intriguing to me because the county is huge. You know, there's the eastern part, there's the western part. Just geographically, it is a huge county to cover. And I hear you on how hard transportation is always a hurdle, just getting from one place to another. And speaking of community, let's talk a little bit about the LGBTQ community, a space that I've been in for a long time. And as people age within that community, it's got its own issues that need to be addressed. Yeah. So tell us kind of where you are with that.
So about 6 months ago, I was pondering about who else needed services, and as we were talking and listening to families, we had one gay couple in particular whose wife attended one day, and she was too high functioning. She was like, "Peace out, ain't doing this." But this caregiver needed help. And so we helped her get her loved one placed and what have you. But the more we sat as a team, we said, who is serving this community? And so we started to talk about that. And so within the last year, we put all of our staff through SAGE certification. So we've had a baseline of education, if you will. But my heart really is to ensure that we're doing that empathetic work to ensure that we can do it quality. I don't want to have rainbows everywhere and saying we're using it as a marketing ploy. It is really teaching my social workers, how do you engage and how do you interview a gay couple? How do my caregivers toileting somebody that could be transgendered? How are we equipping them and preparing them to ensure that they have the tools for success and that this community can be served with dignity and respect and kindness and compassion like everybody else.
You know, and I applaud that, and I wish every organization around us would look at it through this lens of being compassionate and empathetic and accepting people as they are and in the relationships that they are. And so I think it's kind of revolutionary that you are leading with that, because I think in the space of gerontology, that people who are transgender and have to navigate through services meant for, you know, cisgendered people are finding it difficult, and it has this extra layer of encumbrance on trying to serve them.
Most of the gay community, what we're hearing, come out early in who they are, but as they age, because of fear, they're titrating back and they're going back into the closet because they don't want to be ostracized. They don't know what doctors are safe. They don't know what communities are safe to be served. And so they're hiding. They're not getting the services they need. And it's unfortunate because ultimately their quality of life, both caregiver and participant, could probably be so much better if they were served early on.
Well, I applaud the fact that you've just been so, you know, far-sighted in this. Where else do you see opportunities to, you know, specifically address, is language ever a problem? I mean, I've just been campaigning and talking to people about language barriers. You know, that there are certain communities where older people don't necessarily have English proficiency. And so how do you handle that?
So we do have a number of staff who are bilingual. So we have caregivers who speak Spanish, which is great because they can connect with participants who, they might have English, but they revert to their native language through the dementia process. So we're able to connect in that. We have a Korean employee. We have somebody who speaks Farsi. And so we are very aware in the diverse and equity piece of really mindfully, intentionally ensuring that we can serve more. You know, a next step is I would love to be able to provide education in Spanish, education in Korean, and what have you. And so there's a lot of those big ideas that we have, but creating and making sure that we have the right people in place to be able to serve those.
So diversity is everybody is looking for a more diverse staffing situation, but it seems to me that there's a bigger issue in the space that you're in because you need qualified, trained, licensed people. And we were talking before the show about the fact that you need enough people academically to teach these future providers, and that we are short on academic training staffs, which has led to this shortage of people available to hire. And then on top of that, it's the diversity piece. You know, how do you see this being resolved, or can it be resolved?
You know, I was happy to say early on in the pandemic, we weren't really affected by staffing shortages, but we did at one point have a staffing shortage, especially with our certified nursing assistants. And we partnered with a company called ShiftMed. And they created a model to where it does help in the interim, where you can hire somebody to come in for the day. And it was fantastic to kind of get us through that crunch. But I think ultimately, as a nation, as a county, as a state, we need to do our due diligence and really figure out how can we fan the fire of passion of serving older adults and folks earlier in their career. You know, my goal wasn't to work with older adults, but that's where I ended up, and that's where my passion is these days. But I think it's something that has to consistently be talked about for sure.
And to me, there's so many interconnected issues, and one of them I go back to is the high cost of higher education. Because, you know, when there's a new school board member who's getting her master's degree in social work, and you spend so much money getting an MSW, and yet you look at the job pay scale for MSWs, people who are doing social work, and you're thinking, why would somebody go into this field, rack up all these student loans, only to get out to do work they're passionate about, but that they can't even live on, much less pay back these student loans? To me, this is all of a piece.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree wholeheartedly. I mean, we have literally in the last few years had to look at what we pay our employees and what have you for sure to ensure that we were competitive, and especially our nursing team. I mean, through COVID, the nursing field in general, through the hospitals and the assisted livings and the nursing homes, man, they have paid their dues. My gosh, we would not be where we're at today without them. And my staff paid their dues, but we had to look at that, and we had to make sure that we were competitive to ensure that we had the right people in place to serve. You know, there comes a piece where, yeah, you want to serve, but you also need to make sure you have qualified people to do all the things, right?
And all of those qualified people also have to pay their bills, their mortgages, and they'd like to send their kids to college too.
Right.
And so I do think that we are struggling as a nation with not only the services that you're providing, but making sure that on the front end of the talent pipeline, that there's enough incentive for young people to want to do this work, be educated in this work, and to consider this field as a rewarding one. So I just want to thank you for your time, Anita. This has been marvelous. I have learned so much, and I hope our viewers at home have learned a lot too. So if you've got questions, they have a wonderful website, insightmcc.org, and there is a free screening program, and they have a blog, and they have a YouTube channel, and there is so much content. And so I hope you, as a viewer, will check out Insight Memory Care Center and the many things that they provide, because eventually you may need those services, and so may I. That's been what you need to know.